Some of you may not know this, but in California, well, they're nuts. Maybe you did know that. But more specifically, in 2023, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill into law that made it mandatory to pay fast food workers a minimum wage of $20 per hour. The law was implemented on April 1st, 2024, and since then, the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and said that since this bill was signed, 16,000 people have lost jobs in the state, according to Nation's Restaurant News, which I'm not sure, I didn't know was a thing, but they're on top of this because, clearly restaurant jobs affect a lot of people. The question I have is, well, considering the fact that government jobs being lost, even at a lesser degree, prompted protests in the street from a bunch of the libs, where are the protests that are advocating for all of the jobs lost by California policy, raising minimum wage beyond what was, financially sustainable? Here to comment on that and a bunch more is Elizabeth Barkohana. Hopefully I got that right. Sorry for not clarifying earlier. And Jordan Sarmo of America First Health Insurance. I'm sorry. Geez, wow, I flubbed these up. Hey guys, really appreciate you being on. Elizabeth, I want to start with you. You live in California. You've seen some of the ridiculous policies go into place here regarding people with jobs. I mean, just on a baseline sense, do you think all of the people that lost their jobs due to the hike in wage increases would rather have a job or some fanciful number that they won't actually ever get?
It's really sad what happened, and it was totally foreseeable. Everybody was saying this was going to happen. And right when it did happen, when this law started going into effect and people started losing their jobs, we started to see, people who were retained saying, I would rather just have my friend here at work with me, and I'm sad that my friend got fired. Rather than get, the pay increase is nice, but I'd rather have my friend. And it shows, the union power is very influential in California, especially in Sacramento, especially where I am in Los Angeles. The union bosses basically sacrificed all of those low-level entry positions in order for the rest of their workers to get the pay increase. So is that really for workers? I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I would imagine all of those workers would rather have a job than just get fired for this fanciful $20 an hour. The Berkeley Research Group, which is no conservative consortium of researchers, said that California fast food prices have doubled according to the national averages, relative to the national averages, up 14.5% as opposed to 8.2% since the bill was signed nationally. Jordan, you escaped the clutches of California. Is that stuff going on in your neck of the woods? And, do you think other states will learn from California's mistake in trying to artificially inflate prices?
I think we've seen it already happen for the rest of the country. We've learned a lot from California's mistakes. And unfortunately, I'm in Florida. I went from Gavin Newsom to Ron DeSantis, so it was a big upgrade for me. So I haven't experienced it myself. But what I did experience, I remember when I was in California and I went through a Wendy's, and when I was in this Wendy's, the entire drive-through was AI automated. You didn't even have humans now taking orders at this Wendy's itself. And the reason for that is because when you force these minimum wages up to $20, one of two things has to happen. One, they have to raise the price of the food or to make more profit to make up for that loss. Or number two, you have to invest into software and automation that's going to actually replace human work. And so that's what we're kind of seeing, nationwide in a lot of these liberal cities and states that are forcing these companies to pay this certain wage. But it takes away the competition. You're going to have increased labor costs, and the profit margins are going to get smaller, which means they're going to have to raise the price for actual citizens and Americans and their clients. But then on top of that, it's going to force these companies to invest in automation, AI, and software that is going to actually take away the job in the first place, which is what I experienced when I went through a Wendy's drive-through.
Yeah, what it sounded like there is you adequately explained pretty basic economics, which unfortunately is not something that you learn in modern American schools, which leads us to this. The Department of Education is letting go, I think, 1,300 people today, leaving them with, well, I think half of the workforce that they would have had otherwise. And people are, outraged by this. But Elizabeth, I want to get your comments on this. Just overall, American schools, since the Department of Education was instituted, from 1980 to 2020, administration staff in schools grew by 88%, while teacher growth only grew by 24%. The spending has effectively doubled when adjusted for inflation since the Department of Education. In other words, have they been doing a good job, and do they deserve to stick around?
Absolutely not.
Mhm.
So, your first tell about the Department of Education and its utter failure is that it was started by the Carter administration. So, that's your first sign that it's probably not going to be a successful endeavor. And it really has not been. The workforce that's being fired are not like kindergarten teachers. The workforce that's being fired is this wasteful bureaucracy that Doge especially is exposing is completely unnecessary for the federal government to function and to serve the public. And the Department of Education is one of those departments that has been doing a horrible job. But not only that, it is feeding this union machine that is helping the Democrats nationwide. They are responsible for shutting down the schools, which is what got me involved in politics to begin with. So,
Mm.
watch out, be careful what you wish for. When you upset parents and interfere with the education of their kids, you have awakened a giant in the United States.
Yeah, 100%. One of the big things that the libs complain about is the education gap that they say exists between low income and high income families. Well, given when the Department of Education started, none of that has actually changed. In other words, it didn't really make any sort of a dent. Jordan, kind of same question to you, especially since you're in Florida, where I think we did a story last week where New York schools are spending 3 times the amount per kid and having less positive results than they are in Florida. Same question. Does the Department of Education matter at all? Do we actually care about this?
No, I want the federal government out of our education because,
Mm,
the foundation of leadership is trust. And when you lose trust into whatever that is being led, like the federal government, the last thing that you want to trust your children with is the federal government. And we experience this here, even in Florida. I mean, Lake County is one of the most conservative counties in all of Florida. And even in the children's library, I was at a city council meeting last year, and one of the parents brought up this book called Gender Queer. And this book was being pushed by our government to be in these kids' libraries. And there was, and it's not even appropriate to talk about what was in that elementary book here on air. But when you're seeing all of these stories happening in real life, you lose trust with the government. And that's really what happened during COVID when all the schools shut down, and parents for the first time, probably were when Elizabeth really realized this, was realizing what our kids were actually being taught in the
Yeah.
curriculum for our children. And when you lose trust into a federal government, like, and what the conservative or Republican point is, we want less government. We want to
mhm.
localize it. We want to have our local elected officials that really know the heartbeat of what parents want, what the kids want. We want to localize this and let our representatives that are working with us, they're a part of the community, let them make the decisions versus a federal government that is honestly focusing on education for gender studies in Pakistan and other countries.
Yeah, it sounds like I think we're all in agreement with the Department of Education. I think we all say, yeah, don't let the door hit you on the way out.